Hey everybody, how's it going? Today I have a very special guest. He's been on my channel before. We're talking about Tim Durling from Tim's Vinyl Confessions. Welcome, Tim.
Hi, Jeff. Thanks for having me back on.
Sure. And today we're going to be talking about a very polarizing topic. We're going to be ranking the Van Halen albums from the David Lee Roth era. And we've made peace with the fact that we're going to upset some people. People are not going to agree with our picks. But again, I always make the disclaimer, these are our picks. They're our preferences. We're not saying definitively that this is the ranking order, but in terms of our own personal preference, this is how we would rank the Van Halen studio albums with David Lee Roth. So, Tim, I think you're a Sammy Hagar guy, if I'm not mistaken. That's kind of your favorite era of Van Halen. But the point's been made before. It's almost like they were two different bands. The band that had David Lee Roth, and then you got the band with Sammy Hagar, and both some very great albums, but kind of different in tone, different in lyrical content. Anything you want to say about the two distinct Van
Yeah.
Halen eras?
Well, a lot of it has to do with when you came on board. And I really just started getting serious about listening to music when I was 12, and that was 1986. So 5150 came out, and yeah, that was my Van Halen. That was my era. I went back, and actually, it's funny. Like all of the original Van Halen albums, like in 1988, I bought all eight of the Van Halen albums that existed. So I heard them all for the first time in 1 year. So um, I'm a Van Halen fan. I like them all. I even think that the Gary Sharon album has moments. But yeah, I mean, for some reason, people demand that you take sides. Well, Sammy's one of my favorite singers, and so yeah, I'm on that side. But I love all these. I love all the Dave albums. So, but even within the Dave albums, there's going to be people that are going to think my rankings are completely crazy. So.
Sure. Well, I got into Van Halen right around the time Diver Down came out, so I'm kind of solidly in the David Lee Roth camp. Although I think the work that they did with Sammy Hagar, obviously, it speaks for itself. I think they're all very great albums. Kind of like AC/DC. I'm a Bon Scott guy. Some people are a Brian Johnson guy, and that's fine. But I think, to your point, yeah, it's sort of when you first got into Van Halen and what kind of drew you in. But we're going to go through our album ranking, and let's start with our number six pick.
Oh, number six. So
Yeah,
we're
we'll
we're
start from
not
the bottom, like from our
we're not.
least favorite up to our
But
favorite.
what I'm saying is we're not including a different kind of truth.
You know what? I That's a great point. I did not include that in my ranking. I think I was thinking of like the first six albums,
Okay.
but yeah, we can include that. Sure, absolutely.
Okay. Okay. So that would mean this is my number seven. And again, I love Van Halen. I mean, I even invested in this, right? You know, I'm a Van Halen fan through and through. The day Eddie died was a sad day. I was just never met him or anything. So all of the albums I'm going to be holding up are going to be somebody's favorite, right? That's just how it goes. One of them has to come in last. And for me, it's Van Halen 2. Now, great album, it's a great album. I just find that I get the least enjoyment out of this album. That doesn't mean I don't get enjoyment out of it. So that's just where it fell in the ranking. Some of these were easy, some of them were quite hard. It was really hard to put something that I really like this album, down at the bottom. But there you go.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. I want to put a disclaimer, like even though I'm ranking an album seventh or sixth or fifth, that doesn't mean I don't like that album. I like all these albums. I would say I love all these albums. But my number seven, since you brought it up, is going to be a different kind of truth. I just don't have an emotional connection to it. I don't have that nostalgic connection to that album like I do the first six. I think it's a great album. I love what I've heard off of it. I think even though obviously David Lee Roth's voice has aged, which is to be expected, but I like it. It's just I can't rank it above any of the original six for me. So fair enough. Okay, number six.
Number six. I know a lot of people like have called this their favorite Van Halen album, and I like it too. It's Women and Children First. See, I can see the hate mail coming in now. What is this guy talking about? But this is a great album. You know, you really can't go wrong with any of them. There's always been a pretty high standard of quality. Just for me, this one comes in at number six. Like I said, it's not easy to rank albums that you think are of all of pretty high quality.
Sure. Well, and my six is actually going to be the one that you showed as number seven. I'm going to go with Van Halen number two, which I love. I mean, there's so many great tracks on here. You're No Good, which is a great cover. I love Dance the Night Away. Beautiful Girls is a fantastic track on here. Somebody Get Me a Doctor. I mean, I love, DOA is a great track. I can't pick a weak song on this album, but just in terms of albums that I reach for, if I'm going to listen to Van Halen, studio albums that I reach for, not necessarily going to be this one. But it's still, can't argue, it's a fantastic album. I think a lot of these songs were songs that they had when they were recording the first album, but there wasn't room and they weren't going to make it a double album. So they kind of find their way, as it was, because you were expected to put out an album a year back when, these albums were coming out in the late 70s. But you could call it maybe some leftovers from the first album, but I still think it's a solid killer record.
Yeah, I mean, Van Halen's leftovers would be any other band's best material, right?
Yeah, no question.
So my number five, I guess, is actually the fifth album, Diver Down. And I actually went through a period where, like in the mid 90s, I started reading a lot of people would be slagging this album, saying it had too many covers, it's too short, it's this, it's that. And I kind of bought into that for a while, but then I listened to it, in more recent years, and I thought, and I remember why I liked it in the first place. I think it's really fun. I think it's a really fun album, and I think their covers are always exquisitely done well. And this is as good place as any to show this. I haven't got a lot of singles by Van Halen, but I got this Pretty Woman one with Happy Trails, another cover on the other side of it. Um, but I really like Secrets. I think that's one of their overlooked original songs. I think that's there's just something about the laid back vibe of that, and even Dave's vocals are kind of laid back on it too. I always really liked that one. Hang 'em High. Hang 'em High is a song that dates back to their early club days. It was originally called Last Night. I mean, they would do that a lot, right? I mean, they did that their whole career, resurrect song ideas. Um, I always wondered what would happen if they'd taken the music that ended up being their cover of Dancing in the Street and made an original song out of it, which is what Eddie originally wanted. But I know the album was rush produced because they kind of went into the studio and banged out that cover of Pretty Woman, and it started getting a lot of airplay. And then Warner Brothers said, well, you got to have an album, and they just weren't ready. So that's what we got. And like I said, it's a fun album.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. And I mean, I think wasn't Pretty Woman like the advanced single before? I think they
Yeah.
intended to actually make an album out of Diver Down. And
Yeah.
Eddie wanted some time. He's like, look, we've been on the road for, 4 years straight. We just want to take a breather. And the record company was like, well, just give us a single, just kind of a tide me over, just something to satiate, the Van Halen fans out there. And they put it out, and it was such a huge hit that the record company's like, all right, we need an album now.
Now behind it, and then they went on a very short tour. I think they only toured for 5 months
Right.
for Diver Down. And yeah, that song went to number 12 on Billboard, and at the time that was their highest charting song. So yeah, there was definitely a move on the record company's part to say, well, we don't want to lose this momentum. You just can't have a single, because a single by itself will just kind of die eventually. People want an album to buy that it belongs on. And
Right.
also it was it wasn't their first attempt at making a video, but it's the first one that I remember seeing, like the earliest one. And I think it was one of the first videos that ever got banned from MTV. And it's a hilarious video. Like it's just, and David Lee Roth as Napoleon, like that's perfect. I always got such a kick out of that. I'm like, that's Dave.
Yeah, he was meant to be an actor. I mean,
Yeah.
he loves
Oh
him and
yeah.
stuff.
I'm really surprised. I know there was the whole Crazy from the Heat movie thing that went under, but he to this day he could be an actor. I know he's done bit work. He's been on, like he did a cameo in The Sopranos. Yeah, he's such an interesting guy. It would have been interesting to see what he did as an actor.
Sure. Well, my next pick is where I'm going to lose subscribers. I'm going to get hate comments. I've already had people take me to task because I ranked this album so low. And again, I love this album. I just can't slot it above any of my other picks, and that is going to be Fair Warning. I even love the cover. The cover of this, and I know it's a painting by, I believe, a Canadian artist. It's sort of like a smaller, little segment of a larger painting. But I mean, I like it. Mean Street is great. I can see people ranking, this number one just on the strength of Unchained alone. But for me, it's kind of like, is Center Swing better than The Full Bug? I don't know, and Dirty Movies doesn't do a whole lot for me. Kind of the whole disco vibe with Push Comes to Shove. And, and I sound like I'm trying to rip on this album. I'm not, but just if you ask me why I rank it lower than some of the other ones, it's just, I feel like, this has got some moments for me that are a little, I don't know, subpar Van Halen from what we had come to expect, and some of the albums later on. But, Fair Warning, I know, hate on me, but that's going to be my number 5.
For somebody to hate on someone for their opinion on this, you have to ask yourself, what is wrong with this person? Like, who hurt them?
Well, you've gotten comments. I'm sure you have.
Oh, yeah.
Any kind of ranking.
I mean, it wasn't too long ago, Mike and I posted our Journey episode, and there were people who like, terrible album. Got to be Steve Perry. Okay.
Yeah.
Like, this ain't for you then, right? This is
right.
Our opinion.
Do you want to watch a video where everybody agrees absolutely with everything, that you do? I think
it's interesting how different albums hit people at different times. A lot of it has to do with whether they were there when it was new. It's really hard to compete with that nostalgia of, when something seems like, okay, this is the cool new thing and I'm into it, and stuff that you bought. You can end up loving stuff that came out years before, but usually you end up associating with the period when you bought it, not when it came out. So
right.
The next one, my number 4, is actually the first Van Halen album I ever bought. I didn't buy it till 1988. I didn't start buying albums until like end of like 1986 into 1987, and I actually bought this cassette off of an older cousin of mine for $3. I distinctly remember that. And this was, of course, the first I had ever heard of Van Halen. I'm talking about 1984. I mean, as a kid born in 74, and just videos were just really starting to take off in, the year 1984. Couldn't escape, Jump, Panama, Hot for Teacher. And as far as the album as a whole, also, I hate the fact that they do this.
I've never understood that. Why is that upside down?
It's just a very Van Halen thing to do for some reason. I don't know why. I absolutely love I'll Wait. I think that's an overlooked classic of theirs. I love the moodiness of it. I like Dave's vocals on that a lot. It's one of my favorite Eddie solos, and that's the song I always point to when people talk about how Sammy apparently, made Van Halen wimp out. I'd say, really? What do you think about this song that Hagar had nothing to do with? This is how Eddie was starting to write. And I think that Dave does a fine job with it. But Top Jimmy, Drop Dead Legs is so good. I just absolutely love that song. I didn't rank it higher because it's a bit short. And also there's a little bit of the fatigue of hearing Jump and Panama so many times, but they're still great songs. So yeah, that's, and another thing, House of Pain, the last song on this album, dates back to the early days of Van Halen too. Van Halen as well, I meant to say. So yeah, that's my number 4. Great album, and I can see why that was the album that everybody that was their moment, and deservedly so. It's a great album.
Sure. Well, that's my pick also. And I agree with you on every point. 1984 was the first Van Halen album that I ever owned, even though I got into them right around the time of Diver Down. I had the Jump single, saw the video, loved Panama. Hot for Teacher was a iconic video, back in the day. And yeah, I agree, and I'm always one, people who watch some of my episodes before, I like making fun a bit of Sammy Hagar, the fact that he kind of diluted a little bit some of the lyrical content. But as far as how the music goes, you can't pin that on Sammy. I mean, when you were talking like you did before about the fact Dave was Eddie was incorporating that softer synthesizer sound, back on this album. I mean, the title track 1984, right into Jump, I'll Wait. I mean, that had nothing to do with Sammy Hagar. And I almost feel like, 5150 was some of the softer stuff like Dreams or Love Walks In. I mean, what kind of lyrics was Dave going to put to that music? He wasn't going to be talking about strippers, and he wasn't going to be talking about the seedy underbelly of, society. He would have had to have come up with some kind of, romantic type lyric, I would think, just because it suited the music. So, yeah, Eddie was moving in that direction anyway. And I think just like Diver Down, I think this is a fun album. I think Jump is a lot of fun. Panama is great, and I love that line from Dave where he's like, reach between my legs, and you're like, ooh, and then he's like, ease the seat back. Like, oh, yeah. Okay. Just kind of like that lyrical, it's almost like a Bon Scott kind of a, the innuendo there is so perfect. I agree about Top Jimmy, Drop Dead Legs. House of Pain, I think, didn't that date from like the first album? Didn't they have that song kicking around?
The original, if you hear the original version of that song, it ends with a car horn, the same car horn that begins Run the Devil.
Okay.
So those two songs were originally meant to go together. And It's one of their, it's a heavy riff. It's one of their heaviest riff songs. So yeah, it's really, really cool.
Yeah, and I love Girl Gone Bad too. I feel like that's one of these like deep tracks that gets overlooked so often. So yeah, I have no complaints at all with this album. And I mean, I really don't. I can't pick apart anything on here. I think it's a perfect album. And I think it was, the album that really catapulted them from just being everybody's favorite hard rock band to being more of a mainstream act, a household name. I mean, you had in the movie Back to the Future, Marty has got Van Halen on his cassette Walkman, and
they entered pop culture with that album for sure. Yeah,
right.
So my number 3 is surprised me as much as it'll surprise anybody. It's A Different Kind of Truth. Their final album, and it's 10 years old now. And this, this album obviously was the big reunion album with Dave, after, doing 2 songs on the Best Of in 96 and that ill-fated MTV thing. This was the first full-length album. And I was so ready to hate this album when it came out because just Dave's whole persona was just, and then you'd see the live footage because they were touring. They had gone on tour already, like 2007, 2008. And he just wasn't singing. It just sounded like he wasn't even trying to sing the songs. He was talking. And so, like I said, and when I first heard the first single, Tattoo, I did not like it. I thought, after all this time, this is the best that they can come up with because it was the first new Van Halen album of any sort in 14 years. And, I just wish there was more Van Halen for us to debate and talk about. But I listened to it. Not only did Tattoo grow on me, the whole album grew on me. Probably a good half of it, maybe a little bit more than half, are based on older songs, but that doesn't matter. I don't think that matters. It was new to most people that heard it. And what I like about it is that it's got a really, really cool, crisp production to it that they never had in the Dave era before, except maybe 1984. So you're combining some of the Hagar era productions with Dave on vocals. And I think what Dave does on this album is fine. I think some of his lyrics are some of his most clever lyrics. He's a smart guy. And I love the fact that it's a good long album. So it's like it was the last thing they put out. So they gave us, Van Halen albums are typically quite short with Dave. Preparing for this, I think I listened to the first 6 albums in like 3.5 hours, like they were done. And I would like, oh, that's done. Oh, I'll put another one on. Chinatown, I absolutely love. As Is. I'm just a really big supporter of this album, and I know a lot of people slagged on Dave, and a lot of people slagged on the fact that It was leftovers, but they've always done that throughout their career. And if it hadn't been for that, the last Van Halen album would still be Van Halen 3 from 1998 with Gary Sharon. So I'm glad that they came out with this album. You know, it should have sold better, but people weren't buying albums like they used to. And I just really got into it, and I realized I was listening to it a lot and kept listening to it year after year to the point was like, this one is way up there for me. As crazy as that might sound, that's my number 3.
Yeah, my only complaint with that album is why couldn't you have brought Michael Anthony back?
Well, yes, there is that. Yeah, they did not treat him very well. The brothers.
They treated him despicably for as nice a guy, as sweet a guy by all accounts as Michael Anthony is. For me, I just think it's unconscionable that they crapped on Michael Anthony as bad as they did. And you go back to their treatment of him, they forced him to sign a contract taking a lower cut from 1984. They cornered him and they said, look, you're out of the band if you don't take a lower, they pretty much demeaned his contribution.
And Eddie didn't even want him on 2004. And Sammy said, no Mike, no me. It's going to be the 4 of us or nothing. So, and apparently he had to sign away, and then they did that really dirty thing on their website where they took his picture off of the first album, and Women and Children First. I don't get it. I don't know if it's the fact that he became good friends with Sammy, and but yet they wanted him back at one point. So yeah. And his background harmony vocals are missed on this album.
Oh, absolutely.
For sure. Because that, Michael Anthony's background vocals, almost as much as Eddie's guitar, is one of the main things, the common threads between the Roth and Hagar eras, because I think people realized once Dave wasn't there anymore that, that was Michael Anthony singing all those super, super duper high, or like they say, the teapot whistling high harmonies. It wasn't Dave. Mm-hmm. It was Mike. And yeah. That's a drawback on that. I still really enjoy the songs on it, though.
Yeah. All right, my number 3, again, if I didn't lose subscribers before, I'm definitely losing them now. I'm picking Diver Down. I might reach for this album more than any other Van Halen album. If I'm being honest, number 1, I feel like David Lee Roth's vocals never sounded better, even though there are some cover songs on here, but Van Halen did some covers well before this album. He did You Really Got Me. They did that one, You're No Good. So to say, well, Van Halen got too many covers, but in the position that they were in, they kind of got backed into a corner by the record company, and you can't expect them to write an entire album's worth on such short notice, as burned out as they were. But I think the originals on here are fantastic as well. Like you said, Secrets is an amazing song. I think The Full Bug is one of my favorite Van Halen songs. I love how it's got that heavy swing to it. I love Little Guitars. I love the Little Guitars intro. I don't mind Dancing in the Street. I know there's a lot of people who think, that's the worst Van Halen track ever. I don't mind it. I think it's kind of cool the way that they reworked it. For the longest time, I thought Where Have All the Good Times Gone was an original. I did not realize that was a Kinks cover.
Yeah, I'd never heard the original of it either.
Yeah, it's really slower. It does not sound anything like this at all. And I think this is one of those cover versions where they made it their own and they improved upon the original vast.
They always took cover versions to another level, for sure.
Yeah. Hang 'em High is great. I think Cathedral is cool. I love how Intruder segues right into Oh Pretty Woman. I think that's very cool. So I've always stood by this album. I've taken the slings and arrows of people who consider this almost an EP. I don't care. I love it. And that's my number 3.
And I love the fact that Eddie and Alex's dad appeared on one of their albums. He's playing the clarinet on Bad Bill. That's a lot of fun. And when you listen to their version of Happy Trails, you realize how well they sang together. And it's fun. You can hear them cracking up and laughing. And I love the fact that they hold that one extended note. And you can hear somebody go, breathe. So yeah, it's fun.
And they
My
always
number
had
two,
kind of that quirky little song. They always
yeah,
like to put a little silly song on there, like Could This Be Magic? Or, even inside, outside or whatever on,
and yeah, yeah, yeah,
5150.
yeah, yeah, for sure. So my number two, this is where a lot of people are going to tune out, is the first album. All time classic. I can't imagine, being an active rock fan in 1978 when this came out, to the impact that it would have had, because I mean, this paved the way for the 1980s in guitar, in the fact that you had a heavy rock band that were as heavy as anybody, really, with some of the riffs, but you had that fun factor where you had Dave on vocals, and Dave just never, he was never a heavy metal vocalist, as heavy as some of the parts of this album are. Again, I mentioned their harmonies. They always had great harmonies on here. Like if you listen to Jamie's Crying, Feel Your Love Tonight, the little doo-wop section and I'm the One, you know, to say nothing of Eruption, that was a game changer. Their version of You Really Got Me, to me, is the definitive version. Even Ray Davies himself has said how he thought that it was, he thought that the Kinks version was like a prop plane, but the Van Halen version was the big, supersonic jet. Running with the Devil, all the songs on here. I even like, nobody ever talks about Little Dreamer. I wouldn't call it a ballad, but it's a more moody song than you might expect from Van Halen. Again, great harmonies. And this is the only album where, of course, they call him David Roth, which sounds so strange for some reason. But yeah, this is, an all-time classic, hard to dispute. And by now everybody knows what my number one's going to be, but the first one is my number two.
And I love the background vocals on Little Dreamer too. That
Yeah. Yeah. And
so cool.
it's a good, clears a little space, because most of the album is just, bludgeons you over the head. It's good to take that little breather with Little Dreamer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, this is the point of the ranking where, this used to be my number one. Now it's my number two. Ask me again in a month, I may bump this one back up again. It's just so hard because, I think their first four albums are untouchable. I mean, I really do. I think they're strong, even though I rank Fair Warning a bit lower. I mean, I think Fair Warning is just a solid continuation. But I'm obviously Women and Children First is going to be my number two. And it starts off so strong with And the Cradle Will Rock, then straight into Everybody Wants Some. You got Fools. I think the closest thing Van Halen ever came to thrash with Romeo Delight.
Yeah.
Tora Tora is a great, very brief opener to side two, and then Loss of Control just rips your head off. Take Your Whiskey Home's got that great. I love when they do that acoustic blues opening like they did on Ice
same as the
Cream
Full
Man.
Bug.
Yeah, and Full Bug too. I love that. Could This Be Magic's a little silly. It's kind of a little sing-along, acoustic sing-along like they did a little bit with Happy Trails. And In a Simple Rhyme is a great way to close out the album.
That's a fantastic closer. Well, actually, the closer is that little tiny riff that ends the whole album, that dun, 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 which is actually called Growth. They gave it a name, and it was supposed to start off the next album, but in Van Halen fashion, they forgot.
Whoops.
Yeah.
Cool.
So of course, my number one, this is the one thing that I knew would be before I actually started to rank them, is Fair Warning. And I know a lot of people say this is a really dark, my good friend Matt Phillips, he calls this a dark album. I don't hear it. Maybe a little bit more serious, but to me, I have such a fondness for this album, and to me, it's one of those albums where there's not one wasted second of space. I just love it so much. I remember, getting into them, like when I was buying all their albums, which I bought them all in 1988, but I remember seeing the live video for Unchained, and to a lesser extent, So This Is Love. And I always wanted to get the album those songs were on. And finally, I just got, process of elimination, ended up picking this up, and I listened to that cassette over and over and over again. And it's short. I think the album, I don't even think it's a half hour long. It's a really short album to get into. And you're right. The artwork is they're icons from I think his name was William Kurelik. He was a Canadian Ukrainian artist who was quite troubled throughout his life, and I think it the whole picture's called The Maze. I could be wrong about that. I actually printed off the entire picture and shrunk it down to CD size and put it in the front of my Fair Warning CD. But these are just like different icons from it. And originally, Alex Van Halen only wanted it to have this one thing of this guy ramming his head against the brick wall. That was what he wanted the cover to be. But yeah, I love One Foot Out the Door, and my only thing about that is I wish that they'd finished it because it's unfinished, but it's such a cool song. It's got so much attitude. I like Push Comes to Shove, the fact that they were showing like they were more versatile than, most people would have thought with that funky bass line and the sort of the funky guitar. Another thing that I noticed is that Van Halen did this a lot. I used to think they just did it in the Hagar era, but no, they did it here too. They'd put the song titles on the back of the album in the wrong order, and I never understood why they did that. Like on OU812, the song titles are in alphabetical order. It's like, why?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't they be in the order that anyway? I think there's a certain amount of playfulness there. Yeah, Unchained is just, I can never get tired of that song. Neither can I get tired of Mean Street. It's got that awesome intro where Eddie's hitting both sides of the fretboard to get that really percussive sound. And back to Women and Children First real quick. If anyone hasn't seen it, look up Van Halen Loss of Control on YouTube because they actually shot a very, very primitive video for that song, and it is so odd, but it's hilarious. If you ever seen it,
No.
you got to check it out. Like a lot of people don't know they did videos before Pretty Woman other than the live clips. But yeah, they actually shot a video for Loss of Control, and it's not finished. It's like a very unfinished copy, but it is so odd. I highly recommend it. So yeah, Fair Warning, my number one Van Halen album.
I will have to check that out. I know it will never occurred to me that they would have shot a video for that song of all the ones on there.
Yeah.
And they did have. I remember seeing a video for Unchained. It was just kind of like a live.
Yeah, they shot 3 live videos in Oakland in '81. There was Unchained, So This Is Love, and Hear About It Later, which I've never seen. And I've always thought it would have been so cool if they'd have shot the whole concert and put it out on DVD. But because really, we never did, aside from that Tokyo Dome album that came out in 2015, we never got an official Van Halen live album from their prime. Not even the US Festival, although a lot of people have seen that footage. But it just makes you wonder because usually most bands over time, Van Halen just don't seem to. Even before Eddie died, they just did not seem interested in putting out archival material.
Yeah, they kind of marched to, their own drummer, actually, same with, they didn't want to put any videos out for 5150. I think they begrudgingly did that one for Dreams. And they just seemed to kind of like, we're going to do what we want to do.
I think a lot of that was they did not want the direct comparisons with Dave, because when Dave left Van Halen, he took a lot of the creative team with him, like Pete Angelus, who was, I think, directed a lot of the videos, and he directed the videos from Crazy from the Heat. So there's no way that they could do videos that would have competed with what, with like Yankee Rose and Going Crazy and all, those really, really fun videos from Eat 'Em and Smile. So yeah, that's why they stuck with just the live clips. And I think putting out the home video, the Live Without a Net concert, was they're like, okay, you want a video? Here's your video.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. And it was, I think the Blue Angels or it was some sort of aerial.
Yeah, and I don't, you know what? I never saw that much. Our Much Music up here never played that. I always remember hearing about it, but now when people show clips of the Dreams video, it's the '93 one from the live album that they filmed at the Whiskey. The first thing I ever saw from 5150 was Love Walks In. They played Love Walks In, Best of Both Worlds, and a little bit they played 5150. I don't even remember seeing a clip of Why Can't This Be Love, as big a hit as that was. And even when OU812 came out, the first single was Black and Blue, and there's no video for that either.
Right. Yeah, well, it's funny, for me, with Van Halen, I always tell people, Van Halen my mom hated Van Halen when David Lee Roth was the lead singer. But then 5150 came out, and that was one of the first cassettes she bought. I remember she bought 5150, and I'm like, you bought a Van Halen cassette? what's all this about? But I think it was such a broad appeal, even more than 1984 was. But my number one, obviously, is going to be the first album, and it's not your favorite. I totally understand why. I mean, there's always a band is always going to grow. Eddie Van Halen's skills have progressed over the course of Van Halen's life, but I don't know. I can't get away from. I love every single song I hear. "Running with the Devil," the brilliant "Eruption," guitar solo. "You Really Got Me" is a great cover. "Ain't Talking About Love," "I'm the One." I mean, "Jamie's Crying," go down the line. And I think it's like the most bang for your Van Halen buck, considering how brief. I mean, Van Halen 2 was a brief album. "Women and Children First" was very
Yeah.
short. "Fair Warning" was short. This is really, I think you get the most value
I think
for
it's
your
the longest.
dollar.
It's the longest album of the first six, because
Mm-hmm.
1984 is a short album too.
Yeah, yeah. So that's my number one. I mean, "Women and Children First" is up there as well. But anyway, so yeah, let us know in the comments what your ranking would be, and be nice. Okay, don't
Yeah,
pick apart our
these are
picks.
just our opinions. Like, here we go. Our two are different, and Fair Warning was his number four, and I don't begrudge him that. It's my number one.
Sure.
So we hear them differently, but you know, we're obviously Van Halen fans. We bought the records, and we're here talking about them, and it's fun debating these albums because everybody hears stuff differently.
Yep, absolutely. Well, thank you, Tim, for joining. And once again, check out Tim on Tim's Vinyl Confession. We've done some collaborations on his channel, but Tim has guest artists, or not guest artists, I should say, but he's got guest uh, contributors all the time on his channel. And I'm looking forward to the Led Zeppelin cassette, checking out that video that you got this going this weekend.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, everybody, take care.